Welcome to the College of Respiratory Therapists of Ontario. Whether you are a professional member, an RT, or a public member, your role is the same. So we're going to take a look at how you fit into the world of health regulation. The history of this profession goes back to the 40s during World War II. Technology evolved that allowed for the treatment of combat-induced pulmonary edema. This led to further advances in technology and procedures. Of course, advances in technology and in healthcare continues to this day, and the work of health professionals has become increasingly more complex and specialized. In 1964, the Canadian Society of Inhalation Therapy Technicians was formed in Montreal. In 1970, they changed the name to the Canadian Society for Respiratory Technologists, and again in 1984 to the Canadian Society of Respiratory Therapists. Now, their mandate is to advocate nationally and internationally for respiratory therapists. Membership in this organization is voluntary. And while this is interesting, it's important to recognize the difference between CSRT, which is an advocacy group for respiratory therapists with the focus on its members, and CRTO, which is the regulatory body, which focuses on the profession of respiratory therapy. I'm going to talk more about that as we go on. In 1991, we saw the introduction of the Regulated Health Professions Act, which became law in 1993. Since each regulated health profession is to be self-governing, the Lieutenant Governor appointed a transitional council to form and organize CRTO. This temporary council developed, in consultation with practitioners, the first regulations under the Respiratory Therapist Act. In 1994, after determining an appropriate structure, the first fully elected council held their first meeting. The Regulated Health Professions Act sets out the framework for all health professions. In brief, the framework is intended to protect and serve the public interest, to ensure an open and accountable system of self-governance, to provide a framework for the work of health professionals, and to provide consumers with freedom of choice while ensuring quality care. Even though there are 5 bullet points here, you can see that they are really all in support of the first one: protect and serve the public interest. Key features of the Regulated Health Professions Act are determining the scope of practice for each profession, defining procedures or activities which may pose a risk to the public if not performed by a qualified practitioner, and for creating the health regulatory colleges. Each regulated health profession is responsible for regulating the practice of its profession and governing its members in accordance with the RHPA. The last two are independent bodies formed to advise and review. Just so you know, there are 26 regulatory colleges, and they regulate 29 distinct professions. And in 2022, that was almost 400,000 healthcare professionals in Ontario. Despite the name, the regulatory colleges are not educational bodies, and they're not advocacy groups. It's easiest to think of them as licensing boards, controlling the standards for admission and for retaining membership. The health regulatory colleges, including the College of Respiratory Therapists of Ontario, are authorized by the RHPA to regulate their respected practice and to govern their members. The Health Professions Procedural Code, which is Schedule 2 to the RHPA, sets out the practical rules for the colleges regarding all of the things you see on this slide. So you could say that RHPA tells CRTO what and how to do what they need to do, and then lets them determine the best practices for governing respiratory therapists. CRTO is incorporated as a non-profit organization without shareholders, and revenue is entirely from membership fees. Now remember, the Lieutenant Governor appointed a transitional council to form and organize CRTO. And after developing the first regulations under the Respiratory Therapy Act and determining an appropriate structure, the first fully elected council held their first meeting. Oh, I know, I'm repeating myself, but it's important. It's the old question, which came first? And the answer is, council came first. Council, which is similar to a board of directors, currently consists of elected members of the profession from 6 electoral districts and 1 academic district. In addition, to ensure diversity of perspective, there are public members appointed by the Lieutenant Governor and Council. But all council members have the same duties. They owe their loyalty to the Ontario public, to the profession, and indirectly to HRPA. In order to handle the day-to-day business, council hires a registrar, the CEO. In turn, the registrar is responsible for ensuring there are sufficient staff to support the work of council and the day-to-day administrative duties. Staff reports to the registrar reports to council, and the buck stops there. We saw that the code sets out the practical rules for the college. Now let's see how that works. Registering members is the responsibility of the registration committee. CRTO receives complaints regarding RTs from a variety of sources, including mandatory reporting by employers under certain circumstances. So this becomes the responsibility of the Inquiries, Complaints, and Reports Committee, ICRC. ICRC can initiate formal investigations when warranted, and based on facts, the committee is responsible for determining the next steps. Investigations may lead to discipline hearings. This is the responsibility then of the Discipline Committee. When ICRC has concerns about a member's ability to perform their duties, the matter is referred to the Fitness to Practice Committee. Ensuring that CRTO and its members maintain the high standards necessary to protect the public is the responsibility of the Quality Assurance Committee. The Patient Relations Committee is responsible for ensuring there are programs in place to maintain excellent relations with the public. The PRC is also responsible for ensuring there is access to adequate funding for victims of sexual abuse. In order to maintain accountability and transparency, the appeals process is handled by RHPA through the Health Professions Appeal and Review Board. Now, in addition to these statutory committees, CRTO also has a Finance and Audit Committee to help council in the financial oversight of a $2 million budget. Now, there's a video that provides more detail on the work of committees. The Respiratory Therapist Act provides the legal framework. The College of Respiratory Therapists creates bylaws. Council creates committees to ensure the profession of respiratory therapy is well regulated, and staff provides support. Hopefully this helps you understand the role of CRTO in the world of health regulations and your role in it. So, welcome aboard.